Delivery workers. What's the wildest thing you've seen inside a stranger's home? Went to deliver a pizza and walked up the front steps to be greeted by a kid with just a shirt on, who then proceeded to just piss on the ground while staring at me. The mom came out and saw him and was just like, "What are you doing, silly?" Story 2. Went to a person's home to fix their phone. Guy came out with a black sheen of grease-looking substance on his jacket he was wearing, which I realized was due to him never changing clothes. His white beard was dark brown down the middle, where tobacco spit had been staining it. His half a trailer you could smell from 50 feet away. Walked up to the door with him, hit with an awful smell of death, piss, and cigarettes. I took one step inside, and on my right were around 10 animal crates, all loaded with cats that looked dead and weren't moving, covered with roaches and black crap. The ceiling was one big cobweb. Everything in the home was stained brown, and there were no other colors. Literally. Turning to my left, his counter covered and crawling with roaches, with years-old dishes. It looked like stacked with mold and leftover food. The phone was on the wall next to me by the door. He told me it didn't have a dial tone, and thought the jack might be the problem. It was a square jack that you stick onto a wall or baseboard. It didn't have to be screwed in or anything. So I reach up and try to pull the cover off, but the wallpaper came with it, and hundreds of roaches spewed forth going in every direction, crawling onto the ceiling and falling off. I looked at the man and he seemed completely unapologetic or phased in. Anyway, so I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but no, I'm not doing this." I started walking out and he was asking, "What about my phone?" I said, "Sorry, buddy, but you'll just have to get a cell phone or something else." That was the worst living house I'd ever been to. A funny one. Kind of weird dude took me into his room to fix his internet, and he had 2 computers side by side on a desk. Nothing was out of the ordinary except a framed picture of a 70s pussy right next to his monitor. He finally realized it was there, looked back at me, turned back around to the computer, and just laid the picture flat and carried on like nothing. I've also seen sex toy. Story 3. A dude that had 1 plus chickens lived in a farmhouse. Okay, cool, you're on a farm. Rock on with your bad self, except 60 of those chickens lived inside. It was a total cluster duck. He had those grandma-style clear plastic covers over all the furniture. Everything was caked in chicken crap. Crap on the floor, crap on the furniture. He had a favorite chicken that slept with him. Obviously, it pooped on him a lot while he was sleeping. The entire house reeked. He said that he was an army veteran and that the chickens were his therapy animals. Yep, all 150 of them. Worst part is that he had an adopted daughter that he let live like that. The daughter was away visiting relatives. When protective services showed up and told him that the kid couldn't live like that and he had to get rid of the chickens, he stated that his daughter could stay overseas because he wasn't getting rid of the chickens. Also been to a cat hoarder house, 75 plus cats. Some were feral and lived in the rafters of the basement. The smell was overwhelming. Cat crap on all surfaces. The house reeked of ammonia even when you were outside on the porch. I smelled so badly after being in there for just 2 hours that I had to wash all of my clothing and my hair twice. Couldn't get the smell out of my nylon watch band and had to toss it. She is now down to only 40 cats. Story 4. I started installing fiber in people's houses for my internship around 6 months ago, and the third house was easily the worst. I got out of my truck and walked down to the house, and I noticed that there was a rather disgusting odor, and it got stronger and stronger as I was going towards this Met shack of a house. I knock on the door and a lady opened up with her nightgown on, and her 20 or so, yes, you read that right, cats were in the background meowing up a ducking choir. I told her where I'd be running the Cat 6, told her that where I'll install the access point, and told her where I'll be installing the onto box. She said that was all fine and dandy and got out of my way so I can do my work. I start with feeding the Cat 6 through the wall, It can reach the access point where it's behind her TV stand. So I feed it through and go to the TV stand, and that's when it hit me. There was an enormous aroma of cat piss that came from that corner. Keep in mind, the house already stank of cat piss, but it was concentrated in this one corner. I hold my breath and move the TV stand, and what I saw is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my 19 years of existence. There was cat piss that was caked on and slugged into the phone jack that looked like cloudy lemon jello. I was so shocked by what I've seen that I accidentally gasped and the scent went into my nose. I ran outside and threw up my breakfast. The lady asked if I was okay, and I told her that I was fine and went back to finish the job. So I go back to work and start moving some crap off the TV stand for more room, and lo and behold, another discovery. When I was unplugging the AV cables, I noticed little brown speckles on the prongs, and I saw who was responsible for that crawling out form under the TV. It was a cockroach, and that was cockroach crap on the halfway plugged in of cables. I calmly got up, called my boss, and told him that I'm leaving. He asked why, and I sent some pics, and he told me to get the hell out of there. Story 5. In my last job, I was a lead-based paint inspector. For this job, I was at an apartment complex doing the test. Some quick background. To do the test, there is a gun called an XRF. It shoots small amounts of radiation out and tells me if it's lead. You have to do this to all the walls. So I went into one unit where a young lady and her parents lived. I finished up the living room and went into her bedroom. I got 2 walls done and went to the third. But by doing so, I had to walk around the bed. That's when she started walking, but I cut her off because I was walking faster. I needed to test under the window. I put my hand on the windowsill to help brace myself. That when I felt it, it was silicone. I looked up and right at eye level was a black sex toy. She was standing behind me. I didn't say a word to anyone, just kept on with my job. It was 3 hours later before I could tell my coworker, a lady my age, I touched a sex toy. She laughed, I laughed, then she gave me hand sanitizer. My boss called and I told him this story. He laughed and then asked for hazard pay. I didn't get it. Story 6. Not really an SFW, but definitely what the heck. I delivered food to a guy's house and right next to his door was his dining table. He had his entire dining table covered with bananas, spaced perfectly and evenly apart. Not sure what the duck that was about. Story 7. A lesbian couple had a collection of sex toys on display in the windowsill, and another time, I went to this old dude's house and he had statues of naked people everywhere. Story 8. When I was doing HVAC, my office got a call from a house about a vent not blowing, and since they were trying to sell the house and had several showings that day, they asked if someone could be sent out. I was sent out. I got to the house and the homeowner, older, mature lady, but still had a banging body, and the agent took me to the room, explained the situation. I go up in the attic, find a torn flex line, tell them it's an easy fix, and I should be done in about 15 to 20 minutes. I go to my truck, grab what I need, and head up in the attic, fix the flex line, check a few other things, come out of the attic, walk into the hall. As I look over the railing, down into the living room area, the real estate agent has got the homeowner laid out on the couch. Legs over his shoulders, blouse open, skirt hiked up over her hips, drilling her like he's expecting to hit oil anytime. I just walked downstairs, went out the front door, put my stuff in my truck, wrote out a receipt, and smoked a cigarette while I was waiting. About 10 minutes later, the lady comes out, signs the receipt, thanks me for coming out so fast and not disturbing them, hands me a $100 tip and tells me, "Have a nice day." I didn't complain. Story 9. I decided to call CPS on an addict family because the house had no heat. It was January in Indiana. The kids looked filthy, underfed, and cold. The house was completely empty besides one TV the kids were huddled around. Saddest thing I've seen. Story 10. I was once advised, never do a job where you have to go into someone's house. My story only reinforces that. I was living in Oz installing skylights. We went to a house that had recently had a new extension built on it to put Velux windows in the new ceiling. Fairly simple matter, nothing overly complicated about. The new build, whilst not decorated, was pristine, immaculately clean, plenty of natural light, and still smelled of the pine battens used for the walls. At one point, though, I had to go into the old part of the house, I forget why. I opened the door and the smell of cat piss hit me in the face like a literal wall. There was dried up white crap all over the floor, all the curtains were drawn, and there was a thick layer of fudge dust over everything. It was like someone had built a spooky haunted house in a fresh new building as some sort of themed attraction. Except it was the other way around. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why you'd attach a very expensive new build to what felt like a mausoleum, unless you were then going to demolish the mausoleum immediately after. I never met the owners, but from the decor and general ambience, I could only presume they were about 150, totally blind, and with zero sense of smell. I'll never forget that house. I still see it in my dreams occasionally. Story 11. I used to do home restoration, which was mostly mold removal under houses. My company also did vent cleaning, which required us to be in every single room of a person's home. I worked with some real religious types, myself being a pretty open atheist. We do a house in the middle of nowhere. A really lovely older gay couple. House was very clean, nice art, some questionably erotic photos of them. They let us eat lunch in their kitchen, talk to us all day. My religious coworker was pretty cool, very much a not my thing, but it's okay if it is yours. Until we get to the computer room. Adult film everywhere. A sex toy shelf. The final straw that left me laughing, finishing the job alone, were their mouse pads. Each one was just a hunky man with a massive junk. I uncovered the junk by moving the mouse, and my coworker just threw up his hands and said it was more than he could handle. Story 12. No furniture at all, except mattresses on the floor all over. Living room, mattresses, kitchen, no table, more mattresses. Need to get to the electric panel. All other suites have the panel in the bedroom, asks me to wait. Like 10 women in burqas moved from bedroom to stand facing the corner in the living room, go into bedroom to check panel. More mattresses, car plug breaker was tripped, that's all. flipped it on, and left. Story 13. In college, I worked as a pizza delivery person. On my first day driving solo without my trainer, this order came in, and as soon as the ticket printed, everyone groaned and started saying, "Not it." So naturally, they sent the new girl. I get to the address, and it's one of those high-rise retirement communities. When I get into the lobby and sign in, the receptionist just tuts and mutters, "You poor dear," under her breath. By now, I'm a little nervous. I find the door on the 9th floor, if anyone's wondering, and knock. I hear a recliner noise, and a very old man's voice say, "Oh, pizza's here." Then the door opens. Before me was a man with a pristine military hat, stating he served in World War, boots polished to the nines, socks so white they reflected light, and well, nothing else. He was completely naked and at least 90. I blinked in shock, and he smiled so wide and thanked me for delivering the pizza all the way up on the 9th floor. He then said, "Oh, let me get my money," and then turns around, bends over, and begins digging through a backpack on the floor for his money. I could see all, so I didn't have to see that. He finally finds the money, counts out the price of the pizza and ducking change, then counts out a $2 tip for me on change, hands it over, and gently takes the pizza from me. He was so happy to have that pizza. He asked me to wait a moment while he sets it down, and then before I can say anything or prevent it, pulls me into a hug. "Thank you for my pizza. Thank you." Once the shock wore off, he became my favorite delivery. He would order every single Tuesday, always at the same time. He never wore clothes, always had the whitest socks and the most polished boots, always wore that wubby-woo hat. We became friends as much as a delivery driver and a customer can. I never asked why he didn't wear clothes. He seemed like it was the most normal thing ever and never seemed to notice or act like he should be embarrassed or that his behavior was odd, so I just went with it and acted like it was normal as well. One Tuesday, he didn't order. We were all worried. Then the following Tuesday, he ordered 6 pizzas. I was surprised, but relieved he was okay. I once again volunteered to take his order. Only when I got there, he wasn't the one who answered the door. Instead, it was a different, equally old, naked man in a military hat and polished boots. You could tell he had been crying, and he invited me in. Sitting around the dining room table were 8 or 9 other very old, naked men, all with hats saying they were WWI vets. And in the middle was a framed picture of my naked man. It was a wake. My favorite customer had died 2 days after my last delivery to him. The men in the apartment were the last of his war buddies still alive, and they'd gathered to remember him the only way they knew how, naked with pizza. It was the only time I joined a customer for lunch. And yes, I kept my clothes on and acted like it was completely normal the entire time. Story 14. I work as a housekeeper. One guy whose house I clean, single dad of 3, keeps his sex toys out in the bathroom closet. Also, woman keeps pics of herself above her bed. Not too bad looking, actually. Story 15. I was to appraise a house for a real estate transaction. I was told about the enormous dirty collection before I went in, but nothing could prepare me for it. Just mountains of magazines, VHS tapes, DVDs, everything, everywhere. It looked like an adult shop had closed down, and this guy refused to let it go. There were pathways made between the stacks to get through the house. The homeowner didn't really talk much and just sort of pretended it wasn't there. We both did. There were some locked rooms, and I wasn't about to ask a guy like this to show me behind locked doors. And I could tell he appreciated that. I remember it was all freaky and weird, unique adult film, like there was nothing I wanted to check out. Story 16. We did a job for an ex-professor that had an addiction to whippets. Next to the bed, the kitchen table, the couch, the computer desk, everywhere you looked were piles whippets. Story 17. The bad people's corner. I was doing flood restoration work and went to a call. Sometimes you get a weird vibe from their homeowner, and this was no different. Guy tells me that the water's in the basement and points to the door. I tell him, "You go first and show me the way, because I'm not getting that door slammed shut behind me and becoming someone's gimp." As I walk down the stairs, I look to the left and see outfit on a mannequin, a Charles Manson clock in the wall, and way too much memorabilia. He notices my pause and says, "Don't worry, that's just the bad people's corner." Luckily, there was almost no water damage, and I noped the hell out of there. Story 18. Let's say I install things for a large entertainment company. Brings moving pictures by wires to one's domicile. Bad install from the start. The customer lives on a large, overgrown lot in a manufactured home. Think trailer, but nicer. The covered porch had a literal pile of garbage bags and such 5 foot tall, including a rice cooker just molding full of rice sitting on the banister. Smells terrible. Customer's wife opens the door when I knock, and I'm bashed in the face with the smell of ammonia and rot. Garbage bags are everywhere. Dirty dishes cover the kitchen, a solid 3 feet high on every surface. Cat crap is ground into linoleum and half the carpet. The small bits I can see are ripped up, I'm already looking to cancel based on the abhorrent health issues in the house, but the wife is a machine gun of complaints about the service and how no one will work on her house. Duck, now I'm curious. She shows me she wants a TV outlet installed in a corner of their living room. I have her show me the location. At this point, the husband comes shuffling out to move the dresser they want the outlet installed behind. The location is in a corner behind a dresser set up so there is a triangular space in the corner behind the dresser. As he moves the dresser out, there's, I crap you not, a solid foot of cat crap filling that triangular area behind it. It had layers, ducking strata. The husband tries to step in the crap to get a better hold on the dresser. He's having a hard time moving the thing due to the massive amount of stuff crammed and piled everywhere. As soon as he puts weight on that foot, he falls forward as that whole section of the floor collapses around the metal frame underneath. It came unbidden, a primal laugh at the hilarity and absurdity of the situation followed by a duck no. I turned and walked out without saying another word. Called my boss, explained the situation, and had him blacklist the site. I went home and immediately stripped down in the laundry room, threw the clothes in the wash, and showered on the clock. That kind of mental illness is saddening. Story 19. I work as a delivery technician for a medical supply company, and we contract out through the local VA. We mostly deal with older veterans, so I've unfortunately seen a lot. Multiple times you walk into a place and the patients are just completely naked. No embarrassment, no ducks, anywhere to be seen. One guy was lying in bed, totally naked, not covered up, spread eagle, just trying to chat with me, like it's the most normal thing ever. So many just nasty places that I've lost count at this point. It's very common to go into a place where they have multiple pets, and they just don't clean up after them. Dog crap and piss everywhere. Roaches crawling around on everything. There is one guy we have to go out to every so often who literally just craps and pisses in his power wheelchair. The smell from his apartment is so bad, you can literally smell it as you start down the hallway. We picked his chair up one time to do some work on it, and there was actual crap caked onto it in places that doesn't even seem possible. I always felt bad for this guy because he's actually a really cool dude, but man, it's disgusting. This one didn't happen to me, but my buddy at work. He was setting up a hospital bed in the living room of this guy's house. The dude was sitting in a recliner, covered up. He randomly stands up and is, of course, naked from the waist down. Walks over to a bedside commode, sits down and proceeds to take a crap about 10 feet away from where my buddy is setting up the bed. Finally, one place that is easily top 5 worst places I've ever seen. It's a rundown, filthy-looking trailer. Trash littered all throughout the yard. Front porch looks like it's ready to collapse. Driving up to this place, you'd swear it was abandoned, but nope. Walked inside and counted at least 5 little dogs, so little piles of crap are everywhere. You can see where the dogs had pissed all over everything. The smell was just awful. There were at least 5 to 6 people living in this small-ass trailer. The patient was an old guy. I felt absolutely terrible for him. Completely bedridden, paralyzed, and looked like he was on death's doorstep, having to lay there, right in the living room, surrounded by all the nastiness. But of course, they had one of the biggest TVs I've ever seen up close. Priorities, right? Story 20. I'm a plumbing apprentice. We were doing a repipe in a 24-story building that was low income and student housing, so I have a few stories. They were bachelor apartments that had a bathroom, kitchen, and a room. So many of the students' rooms were ducking nasty. You could tell which students had mommy and daddy do everything for them. One guy's room had, I swear to God, dirt floors. He was in there barefoot too. He must have been there a couple years and never washed them. One of the worst student rooms. I saw this girl who had lots and lots of boxes from Amazon, many not open, just laying around. One particular box that was actually blocking her door from opening all the way had like fused, rotted to the ground. Worst part of her apartment, I swear to duck. There was tampons and pads just slewed all over the floor as well as trails of drops of blood. When I first walked in there, I could not ducking believe it. Another apartment had 2 or 3 people in there that literally chain smoked. Their place was always hot boxed, and they had honest to God clouds of flies in there. We were burning them out of the air with our torches. There were a couple of other rooms that were brutal, but they were lived in by people that should not be living alone. People that needed a caretaker. So as disgusting as the rooms were, I felt bad for them. Story 21. I'm a traveling computer technician. Got a call from an old guy. Sounds a little weird, but whatever. He gives his address. It's in a nudist colony. Fun fact, I live in the nudist capital of the US. Great. I go to his apartment and there he was, an almost bone-skinny shell of an old man with barely a shirt unbuttoned and his little sidekick in full frontal view. The place reeked of some strange concoction of something. For the life of me, I couldn't even tell, but I didn't want to know anyway. Hell, I didn't even shake his hand, and he wasn't expecting one, it seemed. I go to his laptop, gunk on the keyboard, albeit not nearly as bad as I was expecting, but I still feel queasy about the whole thing. I make it a point to myself that I make as little contact with the laptop as possible and I don't scratch my face. He keeps insisting that I sit down, and even though I avoided eye contact, I could almost feel his bone-skinny pygmy sidekick egging me on. I do what I have to do with his adult, film-filled, and sugar baby message-infested computer to make it run faster and remove any sort of virus he had. As I finish, I call for him, and he doesn't answer from his room. 10 minutes have gone by. It felt like 100 minutes. And he finally comes back. I tell him he needs to pay. He goes back to his room for another 10 minutes to get his credit card while inadvertently flashing his dollar store steak-looking butt. Am I just going to straight up vomit on his floor? I thought. He probably wouldn't have even cleaned it up. He finally hands in his credit card, surprisingly the cleanest thing in his hole in the wall. I punch it in and I leave, leaving him blue-balled with whatever he was fantasizing about me. He tells me he'll call if he needs anything else and that he'll recommend me to his friends. Yeah, your friends will be disappointed that they won't be getting a young piece of college kid in their crap holes, buddy. I bolt back to my car, grab a massive handful of hand sanitizer, and cleanse myself of all of those impurities as if I was Frank Reynolds' disciple. As I drive out, though, another older dude crosses by, and he looked like he had actual balls. Not going to lie, I actually bursted out laughing watching them jiggle by, if only for a split second before focusing back on the road. Got to find the humor in the worst scenarios, I suppose. Got home and immediately took a long and boiling hot shower. Story 22. So I worked in leasing apartments in a pretty upscale community. Our asset manager, my boss's boss, was making his annual visit, and we had asked a resident to let us show him how the new finishes on our property-wide renovation were wearing in. The resident said, "Sure, no worries." So we walk into the apartment, and everything looks normal. We discuss the new countertops, the appliances, and so on. We then pass out from the kitchen, through the living room, and into the bedroom to access the bathroom and check how the new showers were working out. And in the bedroom was a giant cage and leather straps on the wall. We all froze. He swallowed. This guy must have a big dog. We left it at that. Story 23. I was delivering some aggregate and knocked on the door. Was answered by a tall, ginger Irish lady in a silk dressing gown and a lacy bra, which she quickly covered. I maintained professionalism and kept eye contact after she covered herself up. Story 24. Sweet old lady living alone, talking about hoping to see her grandkids soon and about how cold it's been. By this point, my nose is dead from the things I've seen, but this time, it's bad. I start to discover why as I walk in. The carpet looks like cheetah print, newspapers strewn about everywhere, and a litter box. It's all crap. The entire house looks like it's polka-dotted with crap. She shouldn't have been living alone. There was also the time there were tweakers in a pile under a staircase, and the entire house reeked of meth, with that weird tinny smell. Why they would get high and call for someone to service the house is beyond me. But it wouldn't be their first bad decision. Sometimes it's just overly messy houses. Literally the entire house. All the bedrooms have clothes covering the entire floor. I asked for some path to be cleared, and they're just kicking their own stuff somewhere else. Not just the parents, but even the kids. That was sad. Also the traditional, okay, you can go back there, but you didn't see anything, where I walk onto a chicken farm. Now I know what you're thinking. What makes it a chicken farm? Well, not counting the walkways, it was a chicken cage. That was pretty tame compared to everything else, though. Very friendly after they got over the paranoia. Story 25. Mom and I clean houses together, so we're both used to getting relatively dirty. We're both hard workers, and the house was a small, 2-level house, and we were cleaning their house before they moved in, so nothing inside. Easy, right? Nope. We step out of the car, and both of us are hitting with an overwhelming stench before we even get inside. Mom gives me a look and says she'll go in first to see what needs to be done. So I start taking the supplies out of the car. Then she comes back out and tells me to come in and see how bad it is. I go inside, and the first thing that hits me is the smell of rotting food. Combines with that smell of old house they always have. All right, kind of bad, but I'll manage. She shows me a back room and just points inside, and I kid you not, you couldn't see the floor under all the rat droppings everywhere. It was like someone took a big sack of rice and dumped everywhere. Remember when I said we were hard workers? Yeah, we still did it. I don't know why we still did it, but we did. The droppings were everywhere. In the kitchen cabinets, in the refrigerator, in the icebox, in the freezer. I don't even understand that myself. I had to throw away food the previous tenants had left in the fridge, pick up dead flower stems all around over, and pick up trash they had left all around, all while Mom vacuumed up the droppings everywhere. The worst part, though, has yet to come. We opened the oven door, and I almost vomited on the spot from the smell. It was indescribable, but I can try. Think old food, a gross, musky bug, kind of smell, and dust all rushing into your nostrils at once. I look back inside and there's a straight-up box of pizza in there. Who puts a whole box of pizza in the oven? Who leaves food in the oven when they move out? There were some pots and pans in there too, and big fat baseball-sized balls of something in there. Had to throw that out and it was not pleasant. Got like $200 bucks for it and it took us 6 hours to clean, so worth it? And story 26. Once I worked for an elderly man with health issues and his son, who was about 10 years older and 6 inches taller than I. The customer's grow-daughter called the office and the old man took the call. Their system wasn't working at all and the old man told her that we'd be right out. The old man decided he wasn't going. He wasn't needed as the son and I could go. Now what happens next is that the son and I drive out there and bang on the door. She was expecting an enfeebled old man, and as such she answered the door in her pajamas and a t-shirt with no bra. She was not pleasantly surprised when she got 2 very strong men. She talked with us as she sort of hid what little there was to see behind the door. She asked if we couldn't get in through the basement. We weren't going through the lawn and all the way around with all our stuff when there was that nice pavement up to the door and that nice big staircase going down. The boss's son told her we kind of had to go through the house to not make a difficult mess. She took a breath and opened the door, let us in. Like I say, it wasn't super reveling, but it was a little less than she wanted to have on, seeing as how we weren't half blind, sick, and medicated. We had repaired the system in an hour and a half or two, and we left. She never bothered to get dressed. Another time I was working on pools with an old fat guy, an overweight young man and a goon. The woman waited until we were done, and I was up at the truck smoking a cigarette. The other guys came out and said the woman came out onto the deck topless and started to suntan herself. They said the guy looked pissed. I figured she was trying to piss him off so they could have makeup sex. She had waited until the most attractive guy left, and then she let the goon and the kid and the fat guy see her, because she could easily convince her husband that she'd never sleep with any of those 3. Story 27. I was doing a catering delivery to a house one day. I'm standing at the front door holding a very heavy box and waiting for someone to come to the door. I rang the bell a couple times, but no one appeared. I peeked in the side light to see if there were signs of anyone being home, out back, and a toddler-age girl sees me and opens the door. She's very curious. I asked if her mom was home. She said yeah, and then just stood there. Feeling very uncomfortable, I asked if she could get her mom for me. At that point, Mom appears at the head of the stairs looking terrified at her daughter talking to a strange man at the front door. I frantically explained that I was there to set up the food, and I guess she didn't hear the doorbell. I had to come back the next day to pick up some gear. And similarly, no one answered when I rang the bell. Again, I peek through the sidelight, and just as I do, the girl walks by, followed by Mom, who looks up to see me. Looking at her kid walks by. She looked thoroughly creeped out. I blurted out, "You doorbell is broken," and started ringing it to prove it. I think Mom realized the issue after that, but the girl got ushered out quickly while I packed up. I was honestly terrified I would get reported or something. Story 28. I used to install cable in LA in the 80s. One house we did had nothing around for half the block and a big chain link fence around it. Just the house sitting by itself on a block in the valley. We went up to the door and my helpers, who were black, noped out. I asked why and they said, "Look down." The welcome mat was a big swastika. I said, "Okay, but I need the money." The guy comes to the door dressed in what looked like a brown shirt uniform. He was wearing a Luger sidearm as well. We said hello. He proceeded to tell me he was the leader of the American Party for the West Coast. He said that my helpers could come in. I told him that they didn't really want to. This didn't faze him much, and he proceeded to show me the TV, which he referred to as the electric. It was in his study, which was everything you might imagine it to be. The whole house was like that. His wife was dressed in what I would describe as a peasant dress, and his son had on a uniform. I got his cable hooked up, and he gave me a 6-pack of St. Pauli girl beer as a tip. He did try to give me some pamphlets, but I turned them down. Story 29. Got called out to the crap at around 2 a.m. for an adult female difficulty sleeping, but with my 6th, 7th, and 8th senses all tingling, we take in all our crap anyway. Of course, female about a 710 on the death scale, and a solid 110 on the gross scale, laying prone in the narrow-ass hallway of a trailer, wearing nothing but a disgusting nightgown that probably had been worn for 10 years without ever being washed. What I presume to be son, cracked out on meth, saying he thinks she's just asleep. We drag her out to the trash-covered hoarder living room to have a bit more room to work on her. It's dark as duck in the trailer because they have only one working light, so I can't see much detail. I throw in a line as my partner starts CPR. This trailer's living room has authentic 70s shag carpet, which also had been authentically never cleaned since the 70s, and is caked with grime, some of it forming carpet dreads. and just generally disgusting. It's also weirdly lumpy under my knees as I was kneeling to start the line in substances. As I go to intubate her, which performing on a supine patient on the ground basically requires you lay on your stomach so you can see what the duck you're doing. A cop arrives, and I ask him to bust out his lights so I can see slightly better what the duck it is I'm doing. The shag carpet was positively crawling with ticks, tiny roaches, and just other miscellaneous bugs, which had formed their own sort of carpet horror ecosystem. I fully realize this as I'm laying on my stomach with my head about an inch away from it, suddenly feeling very itchy. I wish I could say it was the grossest coat I've ever worked. Although I've experienced worse, that was just the worst house. Story 30. I worked for a year as a carpet cleaner in Beverly Hills, Chicago. I was occasionally propositioned by MILFs, and once by a middle-aged couple. No thanks. I'm just here to clean your carpet, not to clean your carpet. My favorite story isn't dirty, nor does it involve a dirty house, but I'll tell it anyway. After arriving at a nice lady's house and starting work, she told me that she had to run an errand and would be back shortly. A few minutes after she left, I heard a loud knocking at the kitchen door and a man's voice call, "Milkman!" It wasn't my house, so I ignored it. He again knocked and called, "Milkman!" This time I shut off my machine and went to let him in. But by the time I got to the kitchen and opened the door, he had left. I went back to work. Shortly, the lady of the house returned, and I told her that while she was out, the milkman tried to make a delivery. She laughed out loud and said, "Come with me." I followed her down the hallway and into the kitchen. She led me to a kitchen alcove, which I had not noticed, and there in a cage was a large black myna bird. The lady rapped on the wall next to the bird, and the bird, in its throat, mimicked the rap and said, "Knock, knock, knock." "Milkman!" I was dumbfounded. She then said, "Now watch this." Picking up the bird, she led me back down the hallway to a bathroom. She rapped on the bathroom door, and the bird again made the knocking sound in its throat, knock, and said, "Johnny, you come out of there, right now." Story 31. I work in people's houses every day, and I've seen some ducking grim sights. The obvious cat dog piss and crap everywhere, cookers caked in grease, ceilings caked in nicotine, sex toys lying around, etc. One guy had mushrooms growing on his ceiling from all the mold and stagnant air. But the worst and weirdest one was when I found a dead blackbird in an old KFC box in the lad's bedroom. Ducking baffled me. Then later, got talking to the window cleaner as he passed, and he told us that he refuses to clean their windows anymore because the lad used to literally hang his arise out of the window and take a crap. We were supposed to go back the next day. I wasn't surprised when my workmate called in sick, story 32. Anyway, I used to work at apartments delivering fridges, stoves, cupboards, ECT, as well as do stuff like caulking, painting, etc. Well, one dude had messed up caulking around his tub from black mold or something, was sent to cut out and recaulk it. Dude was saying he had work in like an hour or two and that he didn't want me in his place while he is at work. Okay, cool, I'll be quick. Well, I was finishing up and I heard some commotion in the background. Well, dude was either ducking his fat girl very audibly in the other room or they are watching adult film with the volume pretty loud. I did a half-assed job and got out ASAP. It was so ducking weird. Like I could have came back later after work or whatever. I don't know what the deal was, but that caulking probably needed to be redone not too long later because I wanted to get the hell out of there. I'll note, these are like Met House, so it wasn't super surprising, but it was an eye-opener at 20. Story 33, pizza guy here. I used to deliver to a couple who lived in a not very large apartment, and the folks that lived there were middle-aged and kinky. There was a bed in the living room that was home-built with lots of attachment points. I recognized instantly as a large bondage furniture piece, but only because I'm also kinky. Sometimes the wife would be walking around with a t-shirt that just barely covered her bottom and no pants. Maybe panties, maybe not. The shirt was just long enough I couldn't tell. But sometimes she wasn't visible. One time the guy was signing for the pizza and kept glancing to his left, like at the couch against the wall the front door was in. When he got done signing, he looked again, said "here," and tossed the pen, presumably to her. My guess is that she was tied up on the couch. I didn't get visual confirmation, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I didn't say anything because lots of people with that kink want to feel like they might be found out, but don't actually want it to happen. Even if the person is totally understanding and like-minded, I was still basically a total stranger. Oh, and then another time. A drunk lady, different house, pay tipped, and then showed me her tits. I was excited and told everyone when I got back to the store. The manager said, "Yeah, we've all seen them. She's proud of her tits." Story 34. I was a realtor in the late 90s, and I once showed a house with a dungeon. There are very few basements in this city, but this dude had one, and it looked like 1980s era 50 Shades of Freak in there. Story 35. In high school, I worked as a dishwasher for a restaurant that did deliveries. I didn't do deliveries myself, but my high school-age classmate delivered a pizza to a woman who answered the door topless. Story 36. Was a cable tech for a few years installing fiber to the home for residential customers. Did a job in a wealthy neighborhood, $500,000 or higher houses. Climb up into the attic to start drilling holes to run cat cable. I always us existing cabling to help me locate where I am in the attic compared to where I want the cable to come out. Well, I start finding these things power cables that I don't recognize or know where they go. I decide to track one down and realize it's a camera hidden in the ceiling above the shower. I freak out, put everything back. I finish up in the attic and come downstairs to finish the work in the bedrooms and realize that all the rooms upstairs are girls' rooms. I go back into the attic, take some photos of everything, and called my HR rep, she's an ex-attorney, and fill her in on everything and send her the photos. She told me they were going to file a police report. Never heard what happened. After I left the place, I wished I had just destroyed the cameras. I'm sure whoever put them in place knew I'd found them since I'd looked one straight in the lens. They probably got rid of the evidence as soon as I left. And other than the father, I saw no signs of another male in the family. The parents had a master bedroom downstairs and 2 girls loved upstairs. Story 37. So I worked for a residential HVAC company, and I was caked out to a condo for a water leak. When I got there, the guy seemed like an old school rock and roll guy because he had longer hair and all kinds of rock band pictures and frames around the condo. So I checked out the unit in the hallway and then went to the bathroom to disconnect the drain line under the sink to clean it out. I'm messing around for a little bit under the sink, and then when I finish up, I looked around and see a 2-foot double-sided sex toy sitting on the rim of the bathtub. Also, another time, I had an old lady answer her door with no shirt on. I'm pretty sure she had dementia, and her nurse had stepped out for 15 minutes, so she was afraid I would leave if she didn't answer. She was super embarrassed, so I helped her to her chair and covered her up with a blanket. Story 38. So I work as a manager for a subcontractor company, but we also do private work when people needs us to do things. So this girl's mother called us and told us that her daughter needed her floors refurbished. She was willing to pay us to do the job when her daughter was out of town as a present to her daughter, as she had a spare key to her apartment. So me and 2 other guys are led into this girl's apartment by her mother early one morning. I think it was a Monday. So we were going to refurbish her floors in the living room and in the bedroom. Her bedroom was filled dirty stuff. The worst part of it all, her mother showed us all of this stuff, and either she was blind or she was perfectly okay with what her daughter was doing. Her daughter was 22 years old. But the really worst part of all of this, we had to ducking move it, touch it. Do you know how creepy it feels to handle another person's sex toy? We agreed that no one would have to touch anything without gloves. You don't know if they cleaned this stuff or not. Story 39. The electrical company I work for does a bit of work locally for Habitat for Humanity. Did a job in a disgusting house. All the wall linings were broken and graffitied. Place smelt of death. Lovely people who'd fostered 60-plus kids, but were dirt poor. My apprentice and I were lifting a filthy old armchair out of the way to access the ceiling manhole, and I felt that feeling when something is stuck to your shoe like a bit of tape as I was walking. Looked down, and stuck to my shoe was an old used sanitary pad that must have been lurking under the chair. I freaked out, tried to use my other shoe to get it off, but it transferred to the other shoe. 'Twas horrific to say the least. My apprentice got some horrible school sores from working in said house also. Another time, I was in a ceiling and could look down into a wardrobe as there was no top to it. The top shelf was covered in weird sex toy things with wires coming off them. The whole house stunk of animals as the sole female occupant fostered pets. She was gone for 3 weeks while we worked on that house. Turns out she was a contestant on The Bachelor during that time. Whack. Story 40. Used to do weatherizing rehab on low-income households. Saw lots of crazy crap. Had to move a guy's bed to repair the floor. Slid the bed out and found a knee-deep pile of get-off tissues all crusted to each other and the wall and floor. Had to bag it up and dispose. Hooray, too. House of a hoarder had only one path to get through, otherwise stacked floor to ceiling with nonsense and actual refuse, partially eaten food, almost empty containers, etc. Good news is, the path did lead to the only bathroom in which you could only get to the toilet hole. No bath or sink filled with trash. I repeat, toilet hole. The toilet had been gone for some time, replaced by a mound of used toilet paper and crap about 2 feet deep, around the flange where the toilet used to sit. Also, a bucket for flushing. Took 2 40-yard dumpsters of trash out of that place. Yay, 3. Sex toys belonging to very unhygienic and generally nasty people. More than once. My favorite, me. Found a little box of personal items. You may want to move them. Husband. Nothing little about what's in there. Nifty. 4. People nodding from substances at least weekly. One house had a full-on black market substances operation with people arriving with empty backpacks and leaving with full ones daily. Whole basement was growing room. Yeehaw. That's just a few that stick out. Story 41. I'm an electrician, and I was on call one weekend. Now, usually these calls are for emergency services only, But this call I got, this person was hysterical that his receptacles and light in his bedroom weren't working. I informed him of the extra expenses for on-call, and he agreed, so I packed up my tools and head on over to his house. He asked me to call ahead of time before I arrived. I called and told him I arrived at his front door. The door opened with no one behind it, which I found was very odd, and I walked into the house. The door closed, and there was this man dressed in drag, full-on wig, pink bra, pink panties, high heels, makeup, the whole works. Now, I don't have an issue with drag or anything. The issue I had was that he was extremely drunk, had adult film playing on what seemed to be a 90-inch television as loud as it could go. There were sex toys all over the living room. I reset his breaker and told him I couldn't fix his light. He cried and asked if no paper trail be sent to his house and only pay in cash. He grabbed money off the floor of his bedroom and handed it to me, and I left as soon as I could. Story 42. I once delivered a pizza to a hoarder. I knock on the door, and when it opened, a biblical plague of flies started spewing out because there was a vacuum effect in the hall with the windows open. There were massive piles of what looked like wet garbage and broken lawn furniture. I saw a cat dart away and right away noticed a huge smear of crap on the floor near where it had been. I couldn't breathe through my nose and even felt like I could smell it from my mouth. It was so bad. A lady in a robe with horrendously gross teeth was kind of like, "Hey," because I'm pretty sure my face was reading terror and I was just blankly staring. I gave her the pizza and left. A month goes by and I park in front of her house again, forgetting her address beforehand. My heart sank when I realized. I knock on her door and she opens the door just ever so slightly, like the chain is still locked on the inside. And she's like, "Give me the pizza." And so I staggered a second, then turned it sideways and felt the pizza slump down into a pile in the box and slid it through. Later, a different delivery driver went there and complained enough that we 86'd her for health reasons. Story 43. I work apartment maintenance and heard a smoke alarm going off. After it continued for about 10 minutes, I grabbed keys and did a welfare check. Walked in to smoke everywhere. I look left and see a frying pan with what used to be bacon in it, puffing out masses of smoke. I turn off the burner and look at the counter and see about 6 fried eggs on a plate next to a pile of blows and a rolled up dollar and substances. I have to run out on the patio to get my breath from all the smoke. I run back in yelling, "Hey, is anyone home? Hello?" I turn the corner to a bedroom and see a guy pass the duckout, butt-ass naked with his hand on his now flaccid junk, adult film going on the computer. I'm yelling at this guy, "Hey man, wake up!" Nothing, so I start shaking him, and he just casually looks at me and says, "Oh, hey man, what's going on?" I thought he was dead. Needless to say, he never looked me in the eye after that day. Story 44. My dad did in home HVAC and appliance service. He once did service for a dude with one of those real dolls all dressed up sitting on the couch, and apparently the guy kept telling him to excuse his girlfriend for being shy, not talking. Story 45. I did a year of domestic structural pest control, and I did a lot of bed big jobs. Most of the time, if it's a small sighting, like you saw one bed bug in one room, you would do the affected room and the hallway adjacent. The salesperson that set up the job sold the whole house to the customer. Real quick for any pest control customers out there, unless you've noticed them in other rooms or you have a lot of people moving around in your house and it's relatively small, do not buy the whole house treatment, as you will spend way too much anyway. As per the usual treatment, we have the spray on couch cushions, bed frame, cracks, corners, and sometimes dressers. This customer was an elderly lady, and in her top dresser only remained 2 items: a huge purple sex toy and a very elegantly and well-maintained scimitar. Not only was it really nice looking, but it was very sharp looking, and it looked like it would hack through you in one swing. I had to take out both items to spray and then put them back in there and didn't think about it until now. Story 46. Not for work, but I helped my sister move once. As we were packing boxes, I found a 1-gallon Ziploc bag under her bed, completely stuffed full of substances. Not judging, but this was back when it was still illegal where we lived. My sister stops me from getting anything else from under the bed. About 2 months after she moved into the new place, my sister and her husband were arrested for manufacturing and selling meth. I think her stash was under her bed and she didn't want anyone to see it. She's been clean now for 11 years and her ex-husband refused to clean up, so he's spent a few years in prison. Story 47. When I was younger, made a food delivery to a room at a 4-star beach hotel. With hotel deliveries, especially late at night, you never know what you may be walking into, so I would usually call and give a heads up when I'm near. "Hey, it's EM9RL with your food. I'll be at your door in 10 minutes. Less than 10 minutes later, I'm at the door knocking and some shirtless, trashy-looking dude opens the door, initially looking confused as hell like he wasn't expecting anybody, invites me in, and first thing I notice on my right is some half-naked woman in bed squirming and just looking totally out of it. Guy goes to the table to get a tip for me, and I notice on the table is a burnt-looking spoon with residue on it, and next to that is a bag full of generic CV's brand syringes. My heart sank as I realized these people were addict, and it sank even further when he extended his arm to give me a tip, and it had track marks. Even more disgusting, he tipped me a buck and change in coins. Story 48. Delivered a fridge the other day. 2 young ladies in the house. One just had a baby a couple of weeks earlier. Their old fridge still in the kitchen, and she asks us if we could move it to the garage for her. Yeah, sure. She says she just needs to take everything out first. Starts to unload a crap load of frozen breast milk. Looks at me and asks if I'd like some breast milk. I look at her and her massive jugs, good-looking lady, and force myself to not say something very inappropriate. I am all right, thanks. The 2 of them realize what they just offered me, and we all start laughing. I was really close to say I'd have some straight from the source, but it was the first job of the day and the truck was full. To clarify, they were emptying out the fridge and without actually realizing the implications, just offered something they obviously had plenty of. They were giggling for minutes about it, and so was I. Story 49. Years ago when I delivered pizzas, I sent food to a very old elderly woman's house. I drove up and parked in the driveway to see that the lawn was overgrown up except for a section right in front of where I parked. I see about 20 feet of cut grass and a parked riding lawnmower at the end of it. The mower had been sitting there as the cut section of grass had started to grow back. Someone gave up on mowing, so the lawn looked strange. The entire property looked unkept, and I begin to deliver the food to the door. The old lady answers slowly and is in a wheelchair. She seems nice, but a little off as some older folks are. There were no lights on. I couldn't sense any AC on in the house, and it smelled like old cat litter or cat piss. It was sad. She paid me with exact change. I felt like no one was helping her. It appears she lived alone. I still feel guilty to this day that she has no one to help her mow her lawn. I hope people help her out. Story 50. Delivered JJ's and Papa John's fresh year of college. Lots of addict. Got a BJ from this chick. Seen needles and rocks just on a table right inside the door. Had males and females answer the door naked. Story 51. I am a home health social worker. The most NSFW time that comes to mind was when I was sent out to see a patient, who I will just call G. G was a middle-aged woman with a severe mental illness. She lived with her husband and grown daughter. I showed up and the husband let me in the door and said that G was in the back bedroom, getting ready, and she'd call me when she was ready. Okay, no problem. In a minute, she calls me in, and this is when I learned that G is a heavy-set white woman and was lying on top of her bed, which had the usual blanket and pillows, stark naked, not a stitch of clothing on her, and didn't even reach for the blanket or anything to cover herself. All of which begs the question, what was she doing to get ready? Our visit was pretty perfunctory. I asked her what I needed to know, assured myself that she didn't need anything that I could provide her, and left quickly without looking back. It wasn't a pretty sight, I assure you. Story 52. My brother and I deliver pizza for the same company in a small town. He came home one night complaining about going to some dude's trailer in one of the trailer parks, saying the guy answered the door with no pants on. I laughed, but the joke was on me. Literally the next day, I'm working. We get a delivery to one of the trailer parks. I don't sweat it because there's 3, and the likeliness that I end up going to the same one is next to nil. I get to the guy's house, knock on the door. Guy yells from inside house to come in. I open the door and wait. He yells from his kitchen to bring the pizza in. My dumb ass complies. And then there he is, sitting at his kitchen table, legs crossed, trying to hide the fact he's not wearing pants while wearing an oversized t-shirt. He's drunk off his rocker, and the only thing he can mutter is to tell me the cash for the pizza is on his kitchen counter. I grab it and nope the duck out of there. He is now banned from ordering pizza from us. Story 53. I work for a natural gas company. Went to a home in the hood. Lady is yelling from side door to come in that way. 15 feet from the door, the smell hits me like a punch to the face. Almost start dry heaving. I hold my breath and talk to her at the doorway. She has sores all over her face that are freaking me out. Lady wants me to go in the basement and shut off her gas. I take one step in, shine my flashlight downstairs, and the entire floor looks like it's moving. It's undulating. Turns out it's thousands upon thousands of cockroaches. She was an addict. The sores were likely from the roaches chewing on her if I had to guess. I step out and tell her not a chance in hell I or anyone else I work with are stepping foot in that basement. Send in a note from Exterminator before we would come back. No clue if she ever called back. I see some disgusting houses, but that was by far the worst. Story 54. One of my regular clients has what I've come to call the pleasure lair. His bedroom is full of shelves of a wide variety of adult films, sex toys, and accessories, and an entire walk-in closet of lingerie and crazy costumes. Also strewn about are various paraphernalia, both recreational and prescription. RXED to himself, by himself, he's a doc, to be used recreationally. Initially, I was a bit shocked when I first saw it. but now I've become so desensitized that if I'm going about my business in the house and happen to come across a 16 bright green extraterrestrial junk, I just work around it. Oh, also this guy is like 60 years old and still freaky. In story 55, IF installed EFTPOS machines for business, home, or office for quite some time. At one home, the listed business was an author selling a book, Red Sex Guide, with a sideline of pay-per-view adult film. Of course, I did not realize the second one until entering the room where they wanted the EFTPOs installed and found all these computers, cameras, and also a bed, spa, and massage table. While installing, the author, F, and a friend, M, were also in the room and started getting frisky with one another. I thought this strange as they were supposed to be paying attention to me, explaining to them how to use the EFTPOs, etc. While this is going on, the computers start making new message sounds from what I now know were viewers with requests. Author asked if I would like to play, as the viewers were interested. I go out of there quick smart. Every time I tell this story, it sounds like the beginning of a dirty movie, and it very well could have been. Story 56. I work in commercial pest control and go to various businesses throughout my city. One day I walked into a gas station for my regular service and went to the back storage room. As I opened the door, I heard someone yell, "Hey, stop!" Standing in front of me was a 75-year-old man completely naked. I stood there for a second trying to process what I walked into and then slammed the door shut. He was really embarrassed about it, but we had a good laugh afterwards. I never asked him why he was nude, and I don't plan to. Story 57. I was in my early 20s, a cable installer, and had a trainee on his first day. We showed up to our first job of the day, 8 a.m. We walk in to find a bachelorette party in full swing. 10 very drunk women having a great time. As we are hooking up the TV, there is a soon-to-be naked male stripper a few feet behind us, doing his thing while the girls go crazy. My trainee keeps looking at me, a bit shocked at what is happening, and all I can do is tell him to keep working. We get the cable working, and I go to collect the money, and they are all saying, "That guy took his clothes off, and more, for his money. What are you gonna do?" After a few minutes of joking around, they finally paid, and we left. As we get out to the truck, the new guy is like, "Is it always like this?" Yep. Story 58. Not all NSFW, though. A full-on hoarding situation? Adult room. Pre-internet, boxes of tapes and some toys strewn all over a separate bedroom. Walking through house with owner, opens bathroom door to show me the room while friend was showering while edit it. I remember anymore. I was measuring out an entire house for flooring. Once I measured the entire house and drew it out, there was an empty space, about 8 by 8 feet. When I figured I was missing an area, I searched for it. My search led me to the office of the house. My missing space was behind the bookcase. Upon inspection, I discovered a hinge in an elaborate wooden bookcase. That's where I stopped. Figured they wanted hidden for a reason. Story 59. I did HVAC and while at some man's house installing a heater in his garage shop. He had this crazy airbrushed van, something straight out of like the 70s, 80s, with the typical warrior princess, half nude, fighting a dragon. It was insane. So we finished the job and we are invited into the home while he signs his bills and writes his check for payment. And he has paintings in the same style, all over his house of the same style. Princess, completely nude, hanging with tigers and dragons and the like. Sure enough, his wife walks in, and clearly she's an older, slightly rougher-looking version of the woman in the paintings in the van. Clearly she was his muse. It was both kind of awkward, but nice at the same time. The man clearly loved his wife. Still weird talking to her with a portrait of her with her boobs out next to my face. Story 60. My dad was a contractor. He told of a house where the owners decided to make the kitchen bigger by removing a bathroom. They pulled down the wall and then abandoned the project. Basically, a toilet was now in the kitchen. They continued to use the toilet even after it stopped working and had filled to capacity. They also removed the in-sink disposal, but kept using the hole. It had filled the lower cabinet with garbage. The garbage rotted the bottom of the cabinet and the floor, so there was a hole under the sink that went all the way to the ground. This isn't the worst story, he told me. Story 61. Got contracted to do some remodeling work on a Section 8 apartment complex in Casper, Wyoming. The residents were still inhabiting the units as we went about our work. I entered one unit to find 3 extremely large women half-dressed, stuffed onto a filthy couch, all smoking cigarettes. The floor was covered in trash over a foot deep with a few heavily stained mattresses thrown on top. When the smell hit, I turned and walked out. The GC eventually got the space cleaned up enough for us to do our job, but the sight of those women and kids haunts my memories. I feel disgusted and sad at the same time. Story 62. Years ago, I had a job that involved going door to door. One time, a large, sweaty man opened the door in his tiny boxers, and I could literally smell junk. I know what a dirty junk smells like, and that crap hit me in the face. Dude acted like nothing was amiss. Talked to me for like 10 minutes, took a pamphlet, To this day, I wonder if he was ducking with me on purpose or if he just didn't realize how gross he was that day. Story 63. This last summer, I had a couple contractors in my house to give me an estimate on remodeling my master bath. My wife, the contractor, and I were standing in the doorway between the bedroom and bathroom going over various options. I was leaning against my chest of drawers, and I noticed that the contractor kept glancing over my shoulder. After a few times, I turned my head to see what he keeps looking at, and my collection of brightly colored and steel junk rings are just sitting there, right by my head. I opened the top drawer, swept them in, and shut the drawer. He saw me do it, but my wife had no idea until I told her later. We didn't go with that contractor. Story 64. In home service for a furniture company. 2 quick stories. I once went to an elderly woman's house, and she opened the door in a nightie with a full complete titty hanging out of the armhole. I couldn't stop myself from going, "Whoa." She smiled and said, "Oh, don't mind that, honey," and put it back to rest. Second one is, I was installing drawer glides on a woman's dresser, and when I pulled her drawer out to remove the old ones, a cacophony of panties and sex toy fell onto my lap. I didn't know what to do, and I was in shock, so I just yelled, "Help." She came in the room as I stood up and laughed at me, then asked me to help her pick it up. I didn't, and my face got really warm and swollen. Story 65. I'm not a delivery guy, but for a time, I gave private art lessons. I once went to this 40-something ladies' home for the first lesson, and she was wearing low-waist jeans and a short t-shirt, which left her belly exposed, and, well, I can say she wasn't shaved down there. Not only there was hair peeking out of the jeans, there was also a small trail shooting up towards the belly. She wasn't provocative at all. No idea if she wasn't aware that it was peeking out or if she just didn't care. And while I like me some properly cared hair down there, I found that unkempt vision more disturbing, so I don't know if you can call it nsefu. Story 66. Part of my work involves working on sump pits. I was at this man's house, who had a son living in the basement. The son looked between 20 and 30, probably closer to 30. There was a poster on his bedroom door. Yeah, that kind of guy. Anyway, I'm working in the pit, and right away noticed some gunk in there. Man, I've been doing this for a few years, and I've seen all sorts of mud, scale buildup, rust, sewage, dead animals, 1,000 different species of insects, countless different items in some pits. But the gunk in this one was unlike any other, and it was absolutely caked on, ducking everywhere. I remember doing stuff in the shower. I know what that crap looks like when it's in water. I know what that crap was. Had to have taken years to accumulate that much. Story 67. I cleaned out houses one summer. An old couple had died. We're talking really old and rickety looking from the pics in the house. And we were hired to clean out the house after the family took what they wanted. Basically, everything went into a dumpster. I opened the bedside table drawer, and what did I see? This huge junk pump with the VHS video on how to use it sitting right next to it. I picked it up, I had gloves on, and promptly tossed it to my coworker who didn't have gloves on. He caught it and had no idea what it was. The look on his face was priceless when I finally told him after he was looking at it, holding it, and trying to figure it out. A true hallmark moment. Story 68. Mailman here. I dropped off a parcel at a person's house, and 2 big shepherd mixes came around the corner and almost lost my leg. I smacked one with my scanner and hightailed it back to my vehicle. The entire time, a teenage boy was sitting there, staring at me with his phone out recording. Another one. I once pulled up to another house to deliver a package. I'm a rural carrier, so I don't have a uniform. I normally wear a hoodie and jeans with my USPS badge on a USPS lanyard. As I turned around to go back, I came face to face with this rancher with a hand on a revolver on his hip. After he saw my badge, he walked off, but I was kind of worried for a second there. Story 69. Not exactly NSFW, but I installed dries, and while I was consulting with the designer and his client, both gay men, and on this particular type of D, they were wanting there's a master carrier at the leading edge of the D, and one in particular is called a butt master, because it butts into the master on the other side, as opposed to overlapping like a traditional one. I don't know how many times I ended up saying the phrase butt master to these 2 gay men, but they slowly started to get the giggles about it, and we all had a bit of a laugh. This designer doesn't show much personality or emotion ever, so seeing him start to giggle over something so juvenile was pretty funny. Story 70. Not sure if this counts, but I worked in commercial EMS for a long time. Anyone in this business has seen a lot of ducked up crap. One of my favorites is the first week I was training. We got called for an overdose. Guy was injecting and passed out with the needle still in his balls. Pulled the needle out. Medic gave him Narcan, and the guy came up swinging. He was met by the medic putting him back down on his ass. Story 71. I'm a plumber, and I've been to a few hoarder houses, but easily the worst was this one old lady's house with a clogged toilet. The toilet was in the back room right behind the kitchen, no door or anything in between. The only reason you couldn't see the toilet from the front door was because there was a mountain of moldy food on a table right in front of the doorway to the back room. Turns out, that room gets so cold that the sewer line froze underneath the toilet. Ended up boiling pots of water on the stove and dumping them in the toilet. That was the only time I got home after work and jumped straight into the shower because I was so disgusted. Story 72. I used to do mold, water, and fire damage cleanup. One house had a grease fire on the stove that caused smoke damage to the walls throughout the whole house. When we get to the bedroom, we notice a huge pile of tissues beside the bed. Turns out, the guy's wife had died a year before, and since then he had just thrown every one of his cum tissues between the bed and the wall and forgot about it. My boss tried to make me clean it up since I was the newest guy, and I said, word for word, duck you, I'm not touching it. Make someone else do it, or I'm walking home. He ended up cleaning it himself. Story 73. I was doing termite inspections, and these people had two houses next to each other. Old, historic-looking houses. One was trashed, and the house was just the man's office. He designed satellites and showed me one that he designed that was in space. The other house had two ladies, and they were witches, and the house was just really weird to be in. A lot of weird twists and turns. It was a square building, but somehow had where ovals rooms and a giant library on the basement. Outback had a rock garden with weird symbols made from landscape rocks. They were nice people, just over odd feeling being there. Story 74. Was an installer for a few years. Went to a house in my town that had almost zero furniture. All they had was a TV and big dog kennels, the metal ones. There were 4 in the living room, and only 2 had pit bulls in them, while the others were empty. Thing is, these people apparently didn't believe in potty training, as the cages had crap lining the bottom, and the basement was the same, just heaping piles of dog doo. Went upstairs, 3 more cages with little dogs and a very dirty bed, like filthy. I'll spare the details of the smell. Use your imagination. Finish the job, though. Story 75. I did pest control around Raleigh. Some of my areas of responsibility included gated communities with big mansions. It's amazing how many included some form of dungeon-type room. Also, one place had a big room absolutely full of taxidermized animals from all over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them were illegal to own. Story 76. Was doing some renovation work. Simple stuff, just putting up some drywall. Lady I was working for came out of the shower totally naked and walked down the hall where I was working before going into the master bedroom. Not sure if she was trying to seduce me or something, but I was just very embarrassed. Story 77. I made house calls to fix computers, typically for the elderly. I was greeted once by an 85-year-old man, completely naked. He apologized, said he was about to take a shower, but didn't want me to leave. He then showed me where the computer was, still naked, and explained the problem, and then excused himself to take his shower. I don't give 2 ducks, so worked on the computer during his shower. He then proceeded to walk from the bathroom back to the computer on his way upstairs to his bedroom to get dressed. Still no ducks given. I don't think he realized how weird it was. Story 78. I was a door-to-door census taker back in 2010, and you would not believe how many people come to the door naked. It's not even shocking or interesting after a while. Story 79. Not exactly the most NSFW, but I did deliver pizza for a couple years and some Uber Eats, driving more recently. The most NSFW thing I saw was a big delivery to a really nice house. Worked for a small Greek place in a nice part of town. Turned out the ladies inside were having a bachelorette party and were pretty tipsy. One was soberish. She paid me and took the pizzas, while another woman in the back was screaming, "Is he hot? Tell him to take his shirt off." She tipped me a fresh 100, but honestly, I would have rather gone stripping. Story 80. My porter brought me a worn-out purple sex toy. He found it while doing the recycles. He seemed pretty excited. The thing is, the woman we knew who it belonged to was sort of old, so it was like really hard to look at her when she came to the lobby. Delivery men or women of Reddit, what are some of the weirdest situations you experienced while delivering packages to people's homes? Story 1. I delivered pizzas in my hometown. I live in Westchester and there are some celebrity residents. Anyway, one day I delivered to a very nice house, but nothing that made me think twice. I rang the doorbell and who opens the door but Kevin Spacey? He asks me how much and I tell him $39.37. I will remember the price to this day. He then pulls out 2 $20 bills from his wallet, looks at them awkwardly, and yells back into the house, "Honey, do you have any singles?" A response from somewhere, no. Kevin Spacey gave me a 63-cent tip. Story 2. Posting for my dad, who is a mailman. Not exactly something that happened because of a weird recipient, but definitely an interesting situation. Dad's delivering the mail. A guy walks up to him and says, "Hey, my dog's missing. He's a big white dog, very friendly. Have you seen him?" Dad says he hasn't, but will keep an eye out. A few neighborhoods later, this happy-go-lucky white dog comes bumbling up to the mail truck. Dad gives him a pat on the head and opens up the back of the truck for the dog, who immediately leaps in. Thinking he's about to make this guy's day, he rushes back to the original neighborhood, finds the guy with the missing dog, and tells him the good news. He opens up the back of the truck, only for the guy to give him a weird look and say, that's not my dog. That's when Dad realizes that the neighborhood he took the dog from had a bunch of kids playing around in it, in the general direction the dog came from. Story 3. I delivered pizza for 10 years. Once I took a delivery to an average middle-class home. The door was answered by a middle-aged dwarf who ripped the door open, screamed, "There's nobody! Pause. Home!" Then slammed the door in my face. I stand there for about 45 seconds before a young woman answers the door and says, "Oh, hi, sorry, that's just Jerry." Then proceeds with the transaction like nothing is going on while Jerry marches around the house with his hands in the air, screaming, "There's nobody home! There's nobody home! There's nobody home!" Story 4. I used to deliver pizza. Every week, we'd get an order from this lady that appeared to be living at a motel in the area. No matter what the weather was like, she would always open the door wearing long sleeves, sweater, long pants, and white cotton gloves. She was nice enough, but definitely had some mental issues going on. Apparently, I was the only delivery guy that was nice to her, though. So she would start calling and asking if I was working that night, and if I wasn't, she wouldn't order. She would only order if she knew that I was going to be the one to deliver her pizza. Story 5. Attempted to deliver a pizza back in my delivery days to a guy who thought it'd be funny to scream, "Go away, I've got a gun," after I rang the doorbell. So I sprinted back to my car and left rivets in his gravel driveway while speeding out. He proceeded to call the store and complained that I'd left. I told the GM what happened, and she called the guy back and told him that he would not be allowed to ever order pizza again. On the bright side, I got free pizza that day. Story 6. I deliver pizza, nothing too weird or anything where I live, but I thought this one was funny. I took the delivery and this girl answered the door wearing only a towel. She looked like she'd just jumped out of the shower. She smiles at me a little flirtatiously. Her towel is barely covering everything. Her mom turns the corner and yells, "What are you doing?" and chases her daughter upstairs. The girl got this hilarious, "oh crap" look on her face as she ran too. The mother then came back, paid, then I simply left. Story 7. My strangest experience was delivering to this nasty trailer park. I pull up and the guy is outside waiting for me. Bad news in bad neighborhoods because it might not be that dude's house and he is planning on robbing me. Anyways, I go up to him and he is high as duck off something. I tell him his total and he hands me a 20. Now this 20 was the size of Monopoly money, was in a black and gray color scheme, and printed on obvious printer paper. You could also see where he messed up cutting it with scissors. Now, I had no training on the matter, and apparently you're just supposed to take the money and notify the store. But I was young and dumb, so I told him there was no way I was taking that. He gets pissed. He is cussing and saying he will call the police. I then call the police, and he is promptly arrested for substances offenses and counterfeit currency. Story 8. Not so much delivering packages, but delivering food. Weirdest situation delivering. While I was in college, I worked at a pizza place and was a delivery driver. There were fairly white trash areas around the town, and I would always have to go to the different trailer parks in the area. Every time I would see something so stereotypical of the demographic, it would make me cringe. But the absolute strangest situation I experienced was when one guy, a meth-mouth version of Joe Dirt without the hair, told me flat out that the check he had written for the pizza would bounce, and he is sorry that there isn't a tip built into the check, but he offered me some of his tools. They were random screwdrivers and hammers, and an assorted hodgepodge of random sockets. I told him that I will tell my boss that I dropped the pizza, but you accepted it so you wouldn't have to pay for it. He started crying. The sight of a dude thanking for free pizza was really weird. Most awkward situation as delivery. I was living in the UK and had ordered delivery pizza. When the delivery driver came to my place, I was sort of caught off guard. She got to my house crazy fast, and I had to do a mad dash for my money. The pizza was like $9.70 or so, and I gave her a 10-pound note and grabbed some coins on my counter. I thought I grabbed like 350p coins and a pound. I thought that it was a fairly decent tip and felt pretty good about myself, because the driver was kind of cute. Until I sat down and did a quick inventory of my money and I realized that I totally gave her like 75 American cents and some random foreign coin I'd picked up somewhere in Asia. I still cringe at the thought of what transpired. I called the restaurant like 10 minutes later to see if she was in, and I apologized profusely and told her how I was a delivery driver in college and don't want to be one of the a-hole customers that she complains to her coworkers about, and that I would have tipped her better if I was paying attention. She awkwardly said it was okay and not to worry about it. But me being good guy gentleman Bronco made it way awkward by insisting that if she was in the area again, she should stop by and I would have a much better tip for her. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I realized how creepy I was coming across. And then panic set it. I told her how I'm not creepy or crazy, I just want to give her money. There was an awkward silence that made my comments linger like a stale fart in an elevator. She told me that she wouldn't be coming by to get more money, which I totally understood. I know that tipping isn't expected in the UK. I used to rely so heavily on tips when I was delivering food that I feel very uncomfortable at the thought of not tipping. I understand that this isn't what the British culture is, but can we just take the story as part culture clash, part me making something into a weird situation where I just couldn't stop talking? The question asks for a weird situation while delivering something, and I admittedly became the unintentional weird situation. Story 9, obligatory not me, but my then boyfriend. I can verify as I'd sometimes accompany him on his deliveries and saw this firsthand. My boyfriend used to deliver pizzas for a crafty chain pizza place while doing the whole university gig, and every Thursday night, they'd get a delivery for a deep pan pizza. No sauce, no cheese, no other topping other than onion and mushroom. I kid you not, it was literally just dough with some dry onion and mushroom baked onto it. They never ordered any sides or drinks or any other pizzas. I say they, as whoever ordered the pizza sent direct instructions via the website to leave the pizza on the doorstep and that the money, always exact change, would be in the letterbox. They never phoned in their order. They left their name as A. Smith or something else equally unidentifiable as to the order's name, age, gender. We used to stake out the place after delivering the pizza. I call it that in the loosest of terms. And all you'd see is a hand emerge from a crack in the door that would whisk away the weird dough concoction. My boyfriend graduated uni, and we moved on with our lives. But we still have no idea the story behind the no sauce, no cheese, deep pan, onion and mushroom pizza, and the mysterious unknown hand that would quickly retrieve it from behind a darkened door held barely open. Story 10. I worked at a hotel back when I was just out of HS. I usually worked days as the head bellman, but would occasionally switch off shifts with one of the other guys. I found myself working the 4 to midnight shift, and that night, 3 Dog Night was playing a small concert in our main salon. I worked that, and after it was over, I was just getting ready to leave when the restaurant asked me if I could do one last room service run for them. Sure, they handed me, I think, 3 bottles of Jack Daniels and a couple 6-packs of Coke and gave me the room number. I knew who it was going to be. They had our 2 connecting suites, of course, and when I knocked on the door, I could tell there was a party going on. One of the 3 Dog Night guys answers, motions me to put the stuff down over there, and as I'm leaving through a cloud of smoke, someone says, "They make you work all night?" Nah, after this, I'm done and going home. Well, if you want to stay and party with us, you can. So I partied with 3 Dog Night and their friends that night for a few hours. They knew how to party. Story 11. I used to be a Chinese food driver in high school. This wasn't your typical hole-in-the-wall place. It was a pretty upscale place, so I never had many problems or weird bits. One day that changed, to my surprise, for the better. Got a delivery to go to a hotel down the road. If you ask any delivery driver, they will tell you that hotels are where the weird crap goes down. I get there and go up to the room, which, thinking back now, may have not been the best idea, but whatever. 2 guys open the door and their looks instantly scream at heads. Prison tats all over them. Torn up clothes, the whole thing. They ask me to come in, and at this point, my mind is saying run, but I go inside. The room is disgusting. 10 to 12 Jack Daniels bottles all over, bed sheets everywhere, random papers, and about a pound of substances sitting right on the desk. That was the eye-opener for me. Literally a pound or more of substances just sitting there, broken up, ready to probably be sold. I thought I had witnessed something that I shouldn't have, and they would surely kill me and take my delivery money. To my surprise, they pay for the meal and tell me to keep the change, and I walk out with my heart racing. I get to the car and realize I hadn't counted the money and was sure it was going to be short, and I would have to pick up the slack. Their meals together were $45 or 50 yen, and they gave me 5 $20 bills. Duck, yes. First week working, and I got a tip over 100% from someone I thought would kill me. Super weird situation, but it was the best tip I ever got. Story 12. The weirdest was probably when the customer groped my hand while reaching for the pizza, then wouldn't give me the money until I thanked her while looking in her eyes. I later realized she doused the money in perfume, too. I think she was lonely. Story 13. When I was in college, I had a job where I took people their prescription medication each day, part of a program to keep the severely mentally ill out of hospitalization, because they needed their medication, but weren't responsible enough to get more than a day or 2 at a time. I lived in rural Oklahoma, so a lot of the houses I went to were both pretty far out of city limits, and also pretty rough. One time I had to take medication to this lady, who called in and told me that this afternoon she wouldn't be at her house, but instead she'd be at her dad's. I got instructions on how to get there and proceeded to drive way out of town down twisty little backwoods roads to find the place. When I get there, her dad opens the door and goes, "Hey, come on in." I was young and stupid, but Also 200 pounds and a guy, so I went in. As I walk in, he shuts the door and I realize that another guy had been standing behind the door, just holding a shotgun. I have a bad habit of talking too much when I'm nervous, so I immediately stuck my hand out to the guy with the gun and go, "Hi, sir. My name is Alex." He looks at my hand and goes, "Don't you worry about who I am." The patient came running out from a back bedroom and took her medication. She thanked me and I left. I never went back to that house. Story 14, delivered to an old lady smoking and listening to Hendrix in her backyard. She says she'll give me a $10 tip if I take my shirt off. I just look at her and laugh. She says it again, so I take it off and flex a bit to earn the money. The lady grumbles, says it wasn't worth $10, but gives it to me anyway. Story 15, I delivered pizza as a second job for a while. I had one regular Sunday night customer with what I assume was agoraphobia and probably some other problem. He refused to leave the house or make physical contact, so he had developed a system where I would place his pizza and soda on a platform and he would pull it up from his second floor window. I never actually saw him, just spoke to him on the phone. The order was always the same, a large meat lover's pizza and a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. Story 16, on the receiving end of a pizza delivery. After about 40 minutes of waiting for my pizza, I almost call the place when my doorbell rings. I open the door to a young man in his 20s who looks kind of sweaty and nervous. I take the pizza and give him a $20. It was like a $16 pizza. He tells me he has no change. I tell him, keep it. He leaves quickly. Lots of deliveries, I figure. My family starts eating the pizza when the phone rings. It's the pizza place, apologizing for the slow service and promises my pizza will be here in 15 minutes. I let them know I just got my pizza, it's all good. Then they tell me that their driver was robbed of his money and pizzas. The robber had delivered the pizza to me. Thoughts of what could have been done to the pizza, special sauce, made me throw it all out, and I have not ordered a pizza from Papa John's since. Story 17, delivered pizza in Washington State back around 15 years ago and had several odd experiences. Most bizarre one I can remember, I was delivering several pizzas to a house which came to a total of about 30, and I walk up to the house, knock on the door, and a little kid answers the door. He hands me $40, takes the pizzas, and closes the door. I stood there for a moment and just figured they were giving me the rest as a tip, and the parents were too lazy to get off the couch. I'm almost back at my car and I hear, "Hey, pizza guy, get back here." I turn around and see crazy-looking blonde lady in the door in a towel. I walk back and she starts into a rant about how I was trying to steal money from her kid. I explained to her that I just thought they were giving me the money as a tip, and if that was an issue, they can have it back. I gave her the $4 back, and after a bit more talking, she ended up giving me $2 as a tip. Not that great, but better than having a pissed-off customer. Thinking all was cool, I headed back to the shop. When I get back at the shop, my friend who was managing the shop was on the phone looking a bit pissed. I walk in and he gets off the phone and explains that was the customer yelling at him about my behavior. I explain what happened, and we both figure they were crazy and continue on with the day. Fast forward 20 minutes, I have another order to take and I am putting more pizzas in my car. I go to leave, but there is this big-ass pickup truck in the way. I go to the driver and ask if they could move since I have pizzas to deliver. The driver responds, "Why so? You could rip more people off." I look closer, and in the passenger seat is the crazy lady now with crazy boyfriend driving. I go back into the shop and tell my buddy, "Crazy people here to see us." My friend, being the hilarious guy he is, grabs paper and a pen and walks outside, very obviously writes down the guy's license plate and heads back inside. Then proceeds to call the cops. Shortly after that, they take off, but tried to follow me most of the night, but found it hard in their oversized redneck truck and me in a little sporty pizza mobile. Story 18. My weird one is from several years ago, delivering sandwiches in the downtown of a large city. There was a nice high-rise apartment building next to the building our shop was in. A woman named Cinnamon started ordering to her penthouse apartment there almost every day, different sandwiches, but always with one of our giant pickles. She always answered the door in a robe with lingered clearly under it, and gave us exorbitant tips for literally going around the corner and up an elevator to make the delivery. The tips weren't over $20, but it was substantial enough that when her order came in, we would be like, "Who wants cinnamon today?" in order to keep things fair. The weird part is that none of us were ever invited inside, despite the message she was sending. Story 19. I've got a gross one for you guys. I work for a restaurant delivery service. This one lady orders through our app to the hotel I'm assuming she lives in. It's a very crusty hotel, and she's been living in the same room and ordering the same items from the same expensive restaurant since I've started working for the delivery service. I'm assuming she's an addict, not only because of her facial features, but she's very secretive and only opens the door like 6 inches, grabs the food, and scurries back inside. The items she gets are very gourmet and odd to order so often from a takeout service. I'm not judging her financial situation, It's just an odd thing to do for someone who lives in that specific hotel. Not to mention, our delivery service is pretty freaking expensive. I forgot to mention the main part of the story. Part of the reason she cracks the door open so small is the floor is filled with trash. I'm talking hoarder status. Now she's probably my most frequent customer whenever I get an order for, let's call her Sarah. Sarah at the Vine, I know I'm about to see some weird crap. So 2 weeks ago, I'm having an awesome shift, making lots of tips and having a ton of frequent orders. I get an order from Sarah and proceed to pick it up. She usually gets $50 worth of bruschetta and a large Caesar salad. I don't usually get high during my shifts, but this day was already going great, so I had previously smoked to make it better. I pick up the food and head to the hotel. It's about 2.5 miles up the road. I pull into the hotel and go straight to the back part of the hotel as her room sits on the second floor. Now that I think of it, it's considered an inn, if that helps you picture it better. Anyways, my high ass decides to pull some stupid crap. I want to see her walk out of her room and grab the food from me so that I can see what the duck is going on in that trashy room. I walk upstairs and knock. I lean against the railing of the second floor, which is about a 5-foot distance from the door, and decide to plant my feet so that she will have to come retrieve her delicious bruschetta from me. She opens the door just a smidgen and looks around suspiciously. I'm pretty blazed, so I just sit there and smile and say, "Got your food, ma'am." Here comes the interesting part. The woman is dressed oddly nice compared to her previous outfits. She actually looks kind of cleaned up, except for one little thing. Once she walked out of the room to grab the box from me, her feet were exposed. They were ducking gross. She was wearing sandals that had to be 15 years old. There was no structure, and they bent/scrunched up with every step. Not to mention they looked like they had been dipped in a cauldron of black tar and mold. Can you picture it now? But the quality of the sandals wasn't the worst part. Man, those ducking toes were so black and crusty. The big toenail was basically a Picasso painting, but instead of colorful paint, he used dirt and slime. It was a complexion of green, blue, black, and a little purple at the base. I'm in awe. But here's the best part. Her first few steps kicked some of the trash that was laying on the floor in front of the doorstep, and she tripped on a Taco Bell Baja Blast cup and rolled her foot on the cement. She caught her fall, but rolled her foot so bad that the toenail I'd been staring at broke and started bleeding. It was hanging off of her toe, and she screamed. My high ass was too tripped out to say anything, so I just handed her the food and stepped back only to see her 90% naked boy toy come out and help her in. When I say boy toy, don't picture anyone good looking. He was like a pre-weightless Drew Carey, but black as duck, with Danny DeVito hair. This is the second chance I've gotten to share one of my few stories today, and I don't really know how to end them very well. Basically, I just went home and got higher story 20. I have a few stories to share from my stint as a food delivery driver. The first one was the time I was the most scared on a delivery I've ever been. It was 3:03 a.m. when I got there, the last run of the night for me, as we close at 3. Upon parking and exiting my car, a somewhat still attractive white mid-20s, my rough estimate, girl pulled up into the parking lot. Before she parks, she rolls down her window and asks me if I brought any extra wings, breadsticks for her. I responded with a puzzled no, and then proceed to knock on the apartment door. A black woman and a rather large and intimidating black man answers the door, and immediately the woman asks me, "Where the white girl at?" Not putting two and two together, since the girl parked on the other side of the lot. I shrug and say, "I have no idea." Big black guy, who I'll call BBG, recognizes that I'm just a delivery man and asks for the price. I tell him, and just as we are wrapping up our exchange of goods, the white girl rolls up to the apartment, wearing a skimpy red dress like the girl from The Matrix. BBG motions her inside, and with the door still wide open while BBG is signing the receipt, she pulls out this brick of what I assume to be substances out of her purse. My eyes widen instantly, and now I just want a GTFO. BBG notices that I'm feeling uneasy and gets worried, probably due to the fact that I could rat them out. Well, I begin to walk off, receipt in hand, and BBG grabs my shoulder and turns me around. "Hey, I know you saw that. You aren't going to tell anyone, right?" Balls in my throat, I respond, "No, man. I just deliver food. Why would I care what business you have at this hour of the night?" He releases my shoulder, and I then promptly GTFO'd. The second story is about the time I unknowingly paid an escort $5 to see her nude. Just like a normal delivery, this time around midnight, I walk up to the place food in hand and knock on the door. Now I usually notice when doors are left slightly open and compensate with a lighter knock or by ringing the doorbell. However, this time, I failed to notice the door left creaked open, and on the second knock, the door opened about a quarter of the way. The way this apartment was situated, there was a hallway leading down the length of it, starting at the front door. Well, every light in the apartment was off, except for a light in the bathroom, which was situated in the very back, with its door also halfway open such that I could hardly see into the bathroom. After my knocking, a voice from the bathroom of an older lady calls out, Just a moment, very sternly. Out of this bathroom come a very obese, older black lady in nothing but her birthday suit, carrying a 40 Aussie bottle of malt liquor filled with water and a bottle of hand soap. I was vastly unprepared for this sight, so I instantly turned my head away, but the sight had already burned itself into my brain. Somewhere from the front room, she grabs a bathrobe, and without even tying it up, just D's it over her shoulders back, but still concealing nothing, blurting out, "It'll be $10.68, ma'am," trying my hardest to look her in the eye. But when she comes to the door, she just looks at my feet and says, "I don't know how that got there, but I need to clean this up real quick." Without knowing what I was standing in, I looked down, only to see that I'm standing in a rather large puddle of blood about 1.5 feet in diameter, and it was right in front of her door. After I jumped back and clearly out of the pool of blood and leaving footprints of my shoes on the sidewalk, all I could do was look in shock as she hand-pumped the soap onto the blood pool and then pour the water right afterwards, turning a pool of blood into a pool of watered-down soapy blood. She then says a quick, "Sorry about that," and hands me a wad of bills. Without thinking, I just hand her the food and again promptly got the duck out there. The ride back, I counted the money and found out it was only $6 in singles. There was no way in hell I was going to turn around and get the other $5 she owed me though. Story 21, I delivered catering orders for a summer. Had to make and box up sandwiches and take those orders to various offices around Pittsburgh. Had a fairly large order for Halliburton. When I went to make the delivery as I would any other time, walking into a large corporate office building, things got weird. I walked up to the front desk and said, "I have a lunch catering order for insert name." The lady looks up at me, as if I broke some sort of rule or social norm, and picks up the phone. Putting the phone to her ear and looking through me like a target, she hits one button and says nothing into the phone. To the right, a door opens about 20 feet from me, and two gentlemen in suits begin to approach me. I look back to the lady at the desk, and she's hanging up the phone, still eyes fixed on me, says, "Mr. Name, we'll be right down in a moment to sign." The two gentlemen are now on either side of me, and in a militant tone, the one demands me to place my 2 bags of boxed sandwiches on the ground and turn around, facing the desk, and to put my hands on the reception desk. The one guy began frisking me as though I was being arrested, while the other began searching my bags of sandwiches. I then asked, kind of to all three, if this was standard operating procedure, but before I could finish the sentence, the guy frisking me, in the same tone as before, demanded I keep my hands on the desk and face forward. Dude checked me over, then receptionist lady tells me Mr. Name will see me now. I turn to get the bags and the two guys are walking off with them. As I'm watching this, I'm so confused I can't process speech. They go through the door and another gentleman, older, walked out past them. Guy looks at me, smiles, and asks me, "The boys treat you okay?" Still baffled as to what exactly I just experienced, I hand over the receipt and say, "Yeah, He cuts me off while scribbling on the line, and in a now more serious demeanor asks, "Where's the gratuity line?" I replied, "There's no line for that, and if he'd like to tip, I could only take cash." Guy looks up at me, no longer smiling, and says, "Pity, well, have a good one," and walks away. I've never had a more confusing and surreal delivery experience in all my life. Story 22. I used to deliver pizzas in a very wealthy area of Dallas. One delivery was for 5 large pizzas to this really nice house. I walked in the kitchen and set the pizzas on the table. When I looked around, I noticed there were a lot of older men and women dressed up, drinking, and there was kind of a strange vibe. It felt like a swingers party. As I left, the host asked me what time I got off work, which was around 8 p.m., then asked if I would come back and strip for $200. I said no. Story 23. I used to deliver meals to elderly and infirm people from our hospital that had special medicine or just a nice hot meal they could eat instead of just junk food. One of the women I delivered to was too sick to get up out of her lazy boy chair, so I would come and set up the meal for her on her TV tray. One day I come in and looks like she's just comatose, staring at the TV. Normally she says hello and we chat a bit about my life. I set the dinner up and accidentally bump her arm, which doesn't move at all. Then I realized she was dead and stuff as a board. I verified it by checking her pulse and confirming there was no breathe. I was a lifeguard at the time and without thinking started to give her CPR. I realized something was wrong when her lips were hard and her chest cracked when I tried compressions. I puked and just hightailed it back to the hospital. She had no phone in pre-cell phone days and told the hospital staff. No more. Story 24. 2 stories from when I worked for an ice delivery company in college. One I went on and one a buddy did. Mine was fairly tame, just delivering ice boxes to vendors at Indiana Black Expo at then the biggest part of the convention center, the RCA Dome. When I picked up the boxes, the vendors were long gone and they were unplugged. No big deal, right? Until I go to put those duckers on the lift and get them on the truck. Thunk. Boxes were warm. So what could be floating around in there? open it and get a whiff of ducking, decaying remnants of catfish that they had been storing in the box. Needless to say, we never rented out to that vendor again, considering they broke our policy and state health code. My buddy was much more lucky. In addition to bagged ice, also sold block ice in sizes up to 300. We all hated delivering those duckers downtown because if there was even the slightest crack, chefs would refuse delivery and we'd have to bring them a new one. You had to drive like grandma in a box truck to keep them from cracking. So my buddy gets an order for 2 300-ton blocks at a residential address in a nice part of town. He's freaking out thinking it's a private party or something and drives like he's got Miss Daisy in the back. Shows up and is greeted by a player from the Pacers, I don't recall who. Says, just go dump them in the pool. I'm having a party and it's too warm. Tipped him $60. Story 25. I used to deliver pizza 7 years ago, and one time I encountered a very strange situation. It's about 8 p.m. on a Friday night, so as usual, business is booming and it gets really busy around that time. Orders coming in almost every 4 minutes, so I get my order and get ready to deliver it. Pack up the pizza, and I'm on my way to address about 8 minutes away from our workplace. I arrive to my destination and notice a small post-it that just has an arrow pointing to the right and a very horribly drawn pizza slice next to it. 4-year-old drawing skill fairly obvious. So I follow the arrow. I go to the right side of the house, and again, another post-it with another arrow pointing right followed by a poorly drawn pizza slice. At this point, I'm a bit curious about what the hell's up with the Blue's Clues around the house. So I follow the arrow once more. Finally, I get to the back of the house. Very nice backyard with a very nice built-in pool and water slides. Massive bar and grill area. This house is amazing and very expensive. I look around for some more treasure map post-it notes and I can't see them on the wall, but I find one on the floor, pointing inside of the house. What I saw that day has and will forever haunt me for the rest of my life. I look at the post-it and I slowly look to the direction indicated by the arrow. I start gazing through a double glass door set, and inside the house are 3 men completely in the nude, wearing nothing but cowboy hats and gun holsters with water guns in them, drinking wine, lots of wine, and sniffing lines on a table by their kitchen. They weren't even laughing or talking. No music, just silence and the sound of noses snorting. Next to the substances mountains was a 300-pound woman dressed in a clown suit with her shirt ripped in the breast section and substances all over her face and a can of Miller Lite on both her hands. I've never been so shocked, confused, and scared in my whole life. I see yet again another post-it next to the substances, and it just has 3 money signs on them alongside, yes, the horribly drawn pizza. I simply place the pizza on the kitchen counter, take the money, and leave. Found out later that the owner of the house was a normal dude with a good job and had gone through a divorce and lost custody of his 2 children. Kinda lost it and didn't care anymore. He's in prison now for 20 years of illegal substances possession or whatever it's called. Story 26. Delivered pizza for a small mom and pop shop down in San Diego for a couple of years. Received an order for a couple of large pizza, some wings, and a 2-liter soda. Upon arrival, it turns out the address was a gated community. Pretty common in the SD area. No biggie. What does the special delivery instructions say on the receipt? Should be a gate code or something. Nope. Nothing. Perhaps a phone number to call? Nope. Keep in mind, if we don't ask for the customer's phone number on an order, our manager would get made at us. And upon calling the store back to ask my buddy what the number was that the guy called on, he told me that the number was blocked and there was no way to get in contact with him. So being the cool coworker I am, I decided to be a hero and climb the gate and drive her the pizza by any means necessary to avoid getting my friend in trouble. Keep in mind, I'm not of the athletic type, and I am a rather portly fellow. So here I am, by the miracles, able to swing my leg over and avoid impaling my balls on the top of this 6-foot spiked gate. At this point, I am straddling the gate with the pizza bag and other sides and drinks in one hand, as if I'm Indiana Jones holding up that German chick from falling in between the fissure at the end of the Holy Grail. Then I hear what I most feared, a car rolling up. And what does this douchebag do? He doesn't get out of his car to help me or wait for me to decide how to safely get down. No, he pressed his ducking gate opener remote, and the gate begins to slowly open. Keep in mind, the way the gate opened was that it rescinded into a narrow hole in the wall, and if I had stayed straddled on top of the fence, I would have been the piece of Play-Doh you squeeze through the pasta maker machine. In efforts to keep myself from being squished, I swing the pizza bag and stuff into a nearby bush and swan my other leg over, and began my descent by pushing off and in hopes I would stick the landing like a gymnast. Except my jean leg got caught on one spikes on the top of the gate, and I prematurely pushed off, causing the backside of my jeans to rip off all the way to my ass. So here I am in my newly turned into assless jean chaps. And what does the driver say as he drives by? Whoa, dude, you gotta be more careful. Needless to say, I never attempted to climb another fence again. Story 27. Preface. I didn't notice the title specify packages until after I'd written this whole thing out. So, I delivered late-night food on a college campus with the usual party and stoner customers. One night, I pull up to this house at 2 a.m. and from the street I can hear FUN's We Are Young playing. Not unusual. I often hear music and deliver to loud parties, wasting time trying to figure out who actually ordered food. What I thought was a party was actually two people singing passionately along with the music, a man and a woman. I then spent a few minutes banging on the door, ringing the bell, calling the number, but with no answer, all while We Are Young played on repeat, loudly enough to be heard from the street but not drown out their terrible singing. It wasn't until I got sex on the window of the living room that I got their attention. The music was turned down a little bit and they answered the door. It was a couple, at least in their 40s, who were both drunk and shirtless and forgotten they had ordered food, but were nonetheless excited it had arrived. As they searched for money, the woman, thankfully, put a shirt on. The beer-bellied man, unfortunately, did not. They invited me in and offered me a beer or a shot while I waited, which I declined, patiently waiting outside. Finally, they paid me and I was off without any more incident. Ready for my next delivery adventure, story 28. I wasn't the one delivering, but I was the one receiving. Pizza guy. The total is 12.34 son. Hands, pizza guy, a 20 AA. Pizza guy. So what is your change? Bear in mind, I was 13 and I thought the man was trying to test my math skills, not ask for a tip. I think for a minute and answered, 79666, pizza guy. Are you sure? Me. Double checks math. Yes. Pizza guy. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Pizza guy. All right, good night. Me. You too. After telling this story to my mom a few hours later, she told me that the man was trying to ask for a tip. The rest of the night consisted of me eating my pizza, feeling really guilty.